Hi, I'm Mike Rial, and I'm going to talk about you. Or rather, I'm going to talk about the benefits of you talking about you. It probably won't surprise you to hear that most people in the world have a social media account. It may not even surprise you that typical social media users spend 2.5 hours a day on social media. But what might surprise you is that despite 70% of us saying our primary use of social media is staying in touch with friends and family or posting about our life, on average, you and I only post once a month. In reality, there are a handful of people posting a lot, and the rest of us are primarily consuming. So are we really staying in touch? Think about it for a minute. When was the last time you shared something personal about yourself? No, not a highlight from your child's basketball tournament, or something cute your cat did, as fun as those were, but something personal about you. The thing is, we all crave friendly connections, but most of us struggle to develop real relationships. It's so easy to flick through our social apps, looking to be entertained. But if we adjust our social media behavior during those 2.5 hours each day, even just a little, over time, we'll come to know our family, friends, and selves much better, and build real relationships that strengthen our families and our communities. As we'll see, these deeper connections will result in increased feelings of fulfillment and happiness, and will even improve our health. But wait, I sense a skeptic. I can hear you asking, how can changing my behavior on social media really improve my health or impact my community? That's a great question. Fortunately, there's been a lot of research on that exact topic over the past decade. For starters, consider your own personal experiences. Have you ever felt lonely, even in the middle of a crowd? What about after an hour of swiping through your Facebook feed? Despite being surrounded, physically or virtually, by people we know, many of us still don't feel connected, especially if we aren't actively engaging in the conversation. In these situations, we feel uncomfortably lonely. Loneliness is a subjective feeling defined as the internal experience of disconnection or rejection, and research shows it's becoming more common. Let me explain. In the 1980s, 20% of Americans reported feeling lonely. By 2010, that number had doubled to 40%. That's a lot of lonely people. But here's what's really mind-blowing. Despite social media usage increasing 67% over this past decade, recent studies reveal that loneliness is at an all-time high. We're using social media more than ever, and yet we feel more lonely than ever. Today, 3 in 5 Americans report feeling lonely. Nearly half of adults in England and Brazil are affected. 2 in 5 are affected in India, South Africa, and Malaysia. This global epidemic of loneliness is concerning, but not just because of the mental discomfort it causes. Loneliness is accompanied by serious physical risks as well. Julianne Holt-Lunstad, a psychology professor at Brigham Young University and one of the foremost researchers on the topic, has found loneliness to be a predictor of premature death. Her research shows it to be more serious than obesity and the equivalent of smoking up to 15 cigarettes a day. Sadly, loneliness is also linked to depression, anxiety, heart disease, substance abuse, and many other issues. When we passively consume social media by simply scrolling through our feed, double tapping here and there, we don't engage in meaningful ways that actually deepen our social connections. Rather, we reinforce our feelings of loneliness, which can start to spiral and get out of control. Jen Doty is an assistant professor of youth development and prevention science at the University of Florida with a PhD in family social science. Here's what she says about passive social media usage.
The passive content tends to lead to comparisons, and it tends to lead to magnifying a depressed mood or a lonely mood and feeling like that sense of FOMO, fear of missing out, that I'm not getting to do what other people are doing. I'm not as good as other people, and it leads to negative outcomes.
With so many people suffering from loneliness, the impact on our communities is also significant. One estimate puts the cost of treating mental health disorders linked to loneliness at $1 trillion annually, just in the US. But the costs go beyond the direct impact to our economy. The less we share, the less we understand each other, and the less we appreciate differing perspectives. The less we share, the more entrenched we get in our own biases, resulting in a vicious cycle of community divisiveness. Ultimately, we experience more loneliness, worse decision-making, and decreased feelings of happiness. On the other hand, developing strong relationships can reverse many of these negative trends. At the individual level, relationships have a powerful influence on happiness and well-being. During an ongoing 80-year project conducted by the Harvard Study of Adult Development, it was demonstrated that close relationships, more than money or fame, are what keep people happy throughout their lives. They learned that strong ties protect people from life's discontents, help to delay mental and physical decline, and are better predictors of long and happy lives than social class, IQ, or even genes. During the study, the people who were the most satisfied in their relationships at age 50 were the healthiest at age 80. Therefore, it became apparent that while taking care of your body is important, tending to your relationships is a form of self-care too. Furthermore, additional research has shown that once we understand the circumstances of others, we are more willing to factor in their needs and make decisions that are better for the entire community. Since deepening relationships and engaging with our community can increase happiness and improve the decisions we make, are you willing to give it a shot? It's hard, but it's completely understandable if you feel a bit intimidated. Building relationships does require work. It also requires vulnerability and authenticity, which can be uncomfortable. Get started by engaging with someone or a small group directly in a private conversation. More intimate settings will facilitate more intimate conversations. To kick off the conversation, ask an open-ended and somewhat targeted question that will get the other person to share an experience. For example, you could ask, what was it like starting 6th grade at a new school? What was it like prepares them to answer with details, and starting 6th grade at a new school gives them a topic on which to focus. During a conversation, you will sometimes be the storyteller and sometimes a facilitator. As a storyteller, your job is to share an authentic, appropriately vulnerable story. As a facilitator, your job is to help the storyteller dive deeper and fill in gaps to the story. Both roles require active participation. Everyone in the conversation goes in and out of these roles as we get to know each other better. Let's see how this is done. For the next few minutes, we're going to get to know 3 amazing people: Joe, Marilyn, and Sam. I've invited them to share some of their stories to help us practice our conversations. Joe, why don't you go first?
No, so I am a mom of 3 kids, 3 beautiful little girls, and I am originally from Utah, but we've lived in the Midwest for almost like over a decade. I studied to be a biology teacher, which I love. I love science, and I love everything about learning.
Joe is a lot of fun. She's now going to share with us an experience from elementary school. Some of you will be able to relate. While you listen, put yourself in the role of the facilitator. Remember, your job as facilitator is to help the storyteller share their full story. Pay attention to what's said, but also what's not said. A trick I use is to mentally ask why or how at the end of statements. Don't interrupt the storyteller, but start cataloging some why questions as Joe speaks. If she doesn't answer the questions as she tells the story, we'll follow up. Okay, let's hear Joe's story, then see what follow-up questions we came up with.
Well, one of the major things about my childhood that was, kind of a funny story is so my first name is Taylor, but I always went by a nickname, which was the plan from my parents from the beginning. They both argue that it was my dad's idea, and my dad says it was my mom's idea. So I don't know whose it was, but I always went by Joey, which is a nickname for my middle name. And as a kid, every single year, I had to explain this to the teacher. Well, back in the 80s, or early 90s, now it's a really popular name, Taylor, for a girl. But back in the 80s and early 90s, it was not. So not only is Taylor here, Taylor, and they're looking for a young kid, a young boy, and I have to be like, that's me. First of all, they don't believe me that it's me. And then the next thing is I have to explain to them that, no, I choose not to go by this boy named Taylor. I prefer another one, Joey. So if you could please call me by that male name. And it was one of those things, like, as you know, as a kid, you just want to blend in. So it's like, Brittany, Stephanie, here, Taylor. And you're just like, please let this take 30 seconds. And it always took 2 or 3 minutes to explain. I won't answer to Taylor. I will answer to Joey. Yes, that's what I mean. Yes, Joey is the name I want you to call me. And by the time, it was all over, it was kind of like the class was unhinged. People were laughing. I was laughing. The teacher was completely confused and took way longer than I wanted it to go.
Can you see the story in your mind? Chances are, if this didn't happen to you as a kid, you saw it happen to others in your classes. What else could be shared? Did you think of follow-up questions? Here are some that came to me as I listened. Why didn't you want to go by your first name, Taylor? How did you feel while everyone was laughing during each experience? How did your friends react knowing this would happen every year? The responses to these questions will likely bring to mind additional follow-up questions. Now let's consider the storyteller role. Obviously, you need to tell the story, but you also need to consider your audience. If you're sharing with people you know well, be open and share appropriate personal details. If your relationship is young, it's okay to keep some details private, but still share authentic feelings. As others in the conversation ask follow-up questions, you'll get a feel for what additional information you are comfortable sharing, and they are comfortable hearing. To help us with storytelling, let's meet Marilyn.
My name is Marilyn Donahue, and I am the mother of 5, the grandmother of 23, and the great-grandmother of 5. When I was 12, I had a brain tumor and encephalitis, and I became legally blind.
Marilyn is an inspiration to everyone who knows her, but becoming blind completely changed her life. She's going to share her experience about learning to cope with blindness. Despite the immense range of emotions she likely went through, watch how Marilyn shares an appropriate level of authentic feelings as she tells her story.
I went to Louisiana. It was in 2002. And I spent 10 months in a blindness adjustment program. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that you wore sleep shades because the premise is that once you start losing your eyesight, you end up blind, usually. And so that we did everything with sleep shades on, and it was a pretty amazing thing. And then I learned Braille, and I'm pretty proud of that as well. And we had to travel, and we would get a location, and then we would have to figure out where it was by listening to traffic and whatnot. Mm-hmm. And the final test for that was they drove us all over the city and then dropped us off, and we had to find our way back to the center. Wow. Being completely confused. By using the warmth of the sun, where the sun was hitting us on our back, listening to traffic. It was a great confidence builder, because up until, I always felt like I never fit in anywhere because I wasn't blind enough to be totally blind, and I wasn't visually, what's the word? I couldn't see well enough to be totally sighted. Mm-hmm. I had a friend in Chicago that was totally blind, and one day he said, "Marilyn, are you totally blind?" And I said, "No." "Are you totally sighted?" And I said, "No." He says, "Is there more you can see?" And I said, "No." He said, "So you're really blind." And that was a major change in my life, because once I realized that I could do anything. I just had to do it a little differently. Anything but drive. I don't drive.
Isn't she incredible? She shares enough details to help you feel a glimpse of what she's feeling at the time. I was personally imagining the sun on my back trying to figure out which direction I should go. I'm sure there are deeper feelings Marilyn experienced. Over time, subsequent conversations and further interactions will present opportunities to understand her experience more completely. Just like sharing experiences with close friends and family can strengthen your most important relationships, sharing experiences with your community can bring the community closer together. Your community is made up of people with all kinds of backgrounds. That's what makes your community so wonderfully unique. Our experiences influence how we think. They influence our decision-making process. They have an impact on our personality, the public policies we care about, and even who we vote for. They define our perspective. Although getting to know someone may not convert us to their way of thinking, it will help us see the world a little bit more through their eyes. It will help us be more sensitive to their perspective. Ultimately, it will help us be more understanding and more willing to make decisions that strengthen our community. Sam is a recent high school graduate. He was diagnosed with Tourette syndrome when he was 6 years old and has since become a powerful advocate for Tourette syndrome awareness. See how he uses social media to stay connected with people all over the world.
Yeah, so I'm Sam Rial. I just graduated from the Crystal Lake South class of 2021. I'm currently about to leave on a 2-year church mission. In my free time, I like to play basketball, hang out with friends, and recently I've started a social media account focused on raising awareness for Tourette syndrome. I'm also part of the Tourette syndrome Rising Leader program for the Tourette Association of America. And on Instagram, I like just kind of seeing what's going on with other people's lives. Sometimes if I'm bored, I'll scroll through social media if I have nothing else to do, and it just kind of gives me a look into other people's lives, what's going on, seeing the good, normally just the good, but sometimes the bad of what people are doing, and it's just kind of fun to do that sometimes. It kind of lets people share, they can just say whatever they want, and it lets them share stuff about them that I might not know. For example, if there's someone at school where I might talk to them, but I don't really, they're not one of my closest friends, or maybe not in a lot of classes with them. Sometimes they can post stuff on social media, post on Instagram or the Instagram stories, and just kind of share more about them. And it's kind of cool just to get to know them. Oh, I didn't know they like that. Oh, they like basketball too, because they're posting basketball stats on their Instagram stories. So it's kind of cool to find something relatable with them that, oh, I like basketball too. It's cool. Maybe we'd be good friends.
As we've seen, staying connected is so important to successful relationships, our personal health, and our ongoing happiness. I've shared some research, and we've talked through things we can do to facilitate meaningful conversations. You understand how important these conversations are. Unfortunately, popular social media apps aren't set up to help us nurture the meaningful relationships we need. They are great for staying in touch with large groups of people, but not having safe, private, and personal conversations with an intimate group. Early Me is an organization established to create tools to help us develop these relationships. The Early Me app provides a secure environment for having these conversations. You can't always be in person for your conversations, but with the app, you can still share your experiences no matter where you are and feel confident your stories are safe. You are free to get more personal. Furthermore, with the Early Me project, community members can easily share experiences with each other. The volunteer effort, sponsored by Early Me, aims to record and share personal experiences from everyone in our communities. Our experiences are powerful. They made us who we are today. They made each of us unique. Sharing them allows us to develop relationships that significantly reduce loneliness, strengthen family and friend relationships, promote community goodwill, and improve our overall health and well-being. Let's work together to make this happen.